Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain about business rules in Dataverse. Business rules in Dataverse are a low-code tool used to apply logic, validations, and automation directly to the Dataverse table without writing custom code. I have listed down some examples which can be implemented using business rules. For example, setting value in a column, making a column as business required, validate data and show error message, and prompting users with recommendations. These are just examples. We can achieve many more with business rules. Now we'll go ahead and create a business rule. I'm having this Dataverse table called project request, and I am having a model driven app on top of it. And the business rule which I'm going to create is if the estimated budget, if value of this column is greater than 100,000, in that case, this column approving manager, this should be business required. It cannot be blank. So we'll create a business rule for this case. For creating business rule, we have to click on this business rule, create a new business rule. I'll set the name for this business rule. Then I have to update the condition. For every business rule, there has to be a condition. We cannot have a business rule without a condition. For example, we cannot have a business rule saying this column should always be business required, irrespective of any precondition. If that is the case, then instead of creating business rule for that, we can directly configure this in our Dataverse column, where we can make the column as business required. I'll configure my if condition, set it display name. It's good practice to always name our components. Column should be estimated budget. Operator is greater than. Type. There are three options in type. Value, where we can set a absolute value. Field, where we can compare it with a other field of the same table. And third is formula, where we can have a basic formula. I'll select value and set the value as 100,000. After configuring each component, we have to click on apply. Next, I'll configure my set business required component. I'll update the display name. I'll select my column, which is approving manager, and this should be business required. Apply. Now I have created my business rule. After that, I'll click on validate. The validation is successful. We can see the message here. Click on save. Then finally, click on activate. We have to activate every business rule, then only it will become active. Now it is active. We can see instead of activate, we are having deactivate option here. Now we'll go and test this business rule. I'll do a hard refresh on my model driven app. I'll create a new record. Project name. Before updating estimated budget, we can see there is no star mark, red star mark for this field, approving manager. However, if I make the value of this greater than 100,000, in that case, we can see we are having this red star mark, which means this is business required. If I click on save and close, then we'll get an error saying the approving manager is required. If I update approving manager, then I'll be able to save and close. We can see this record has been added. I'll go back to my business rule. I would like to show some additional options in this business rule. First is this text view. Text view, this represents our business rule in a plain text form. So we can see in the if condition it is mentioned estimated budget greater than 100,000, and in the then condition it is mentioned that set approving manager is business required. So this way we don't have to go and click each and every component to understand what the business rules does. So this text view, this becomes handy, especially when we are having a very complex business rule having multiple components. Next is snapshot option. Let's say we want to take a snapshot of this business rule. In that case, we can click on this snapshot and we can save it to our local. We can share this snapshot with our colleagues. And finally, the scope. Currently, it is set, the scope is set to entity, which means it is applicable to the Dataverse table. So it doesn't matter if the data is updated using model driven app or a canvas app or any other source. It can be Power Automate or a API or a plugin. So this business rule is applicable in all the scenarios. However, if I select this all form, this means this business rule is applicable only for model driven apps. So all form, this signifies that it is applicable to all main forms and all quick create forms of model driven app. And the other options are the individual forms in my Dataverse table. In my Dataverse table, there are two main forms. The first main form is information. The second main form is the name of the second main form is second main form. I'll show in my Dataverse table also. Forms. We can see the name of the first main form is information and the name of the second main form is second main form. If I set the scope as second main form, then this business rule is applicable only to second main form, no other forms. I'll activate this and I'll show it in my model driven app also. This is active. Hard refresh. I'll create a new record. Here we can see there is no red star mark for this approving manager field. However, if I make the value greater than 100,000, still we cannot see that red star mark because the scope of this business rule has been changed to the second main form. Currently we are in information form, which is the first main form. And if I go ahead and save and close, then it will get saved. However, if I switch the form to the second main form, I'll switch to second main form. I'll set my project and there is no red star mark for this approving manager. And if I make this value greater than 100,000, we are having this red star mark. And if I, without updating this approving manager, if I save and close, then it won't allow. I'm getting another message. If I update approving manager, then it will get saved. So yeah, this is about the scope. of this business rule. Now I'll show the other business rules which are there for this Dataverse table. So I have created some other business rules. First is lock unlock field. In this text view, we can see if the status equals approved or rejected, then lock the estimated budget field. So if I go to my model driven app, create a new record, I'll switch back to the information form. Here, if the status, if this is approved, in that case the estimated budget field should be locked. So I'll update estimated budget, and we can see currently there is no lock icon for this field. However, the moment I make this status as approved, then we can see there is a lock button and this field has become uneditable. I can't edit this field. If I have to edit this field, then again I have to change the status, and then only I can edit this field. Yeah, if I submit, if I do save and close, it's submitted. And if I again click on this, then we can see there is no lock icon and I will be able to edit this. Second business rule is recommendation. I'll come to this business rule in the end. After this, we are having set this business rule. We already discussed about this. Next is set default value. If the estimated budget doesn't contain data, then set the default value as 0. If I create a new record, we can see the default value of estimated budget, this is 0. So even if I don't update anything, and if I go ahead and do save and close, we can see the default value is 0 here. And one point uh, um, to be noted is this set default view, this default value business rule, this is applicable only for new records. It is not applicable for existing record. For example, if I again make the value of this as blank and I save and close, in that case the value is blank. Now it's not defaulted to 0. So this business rule, set default value, is applicable only for new records. Next is set visibility. If the project category equals author, then show the author category field, or else hide the author category field. I'll create a new record. Here we can see there is no author category field visible. However, if I set the project category as author, then we can see this author category field. And if I again make this value as something else apart from author, then again that author category field, that is hidden. Next, show error message. If end date is less than start date, then show error message. So here, let's see, I'll select start date as today's date, end date as yesterday's date. In this case, it's showing an error message and I will not be able to save this record. However, in case I make the end date greater than start date, in that case, I will be able to save this record. So yeah, I have explained all the business rules for this. Sorry, one is pending, which is recommendation. Yeah. This recommendation, it says if the project category equals author, then make a recommendation that the status should be draft. I'll show this in my app also. I'll create a new account, and currently we can see there is no bulb icon for this field, the status field. However, if I select this project category to author, in this case we can see there is a bulb icon here, and it gives a recommendation that status should be draft for project category as author. So if I click on apply, then it will auto populate this value of the status to draft. And one thing to be noted, it's not mandatory that the value of this should be draft. It's just a recommendation. We can set it to something else also, and then we can save and close. It got saved. So yeah, these are the business rules which I have created for model driven app. Actually, I have shown all the existing business rules which are there out of the box. Apart from this one, which is set field value. This is also simple. It just sets the value of a field. You can check the documentation of this also. After this, I want to show how this validation is performed. So this validation is performed client side, which is this is done in browser. It's not done in the server side. So I'll show this also. So if I click on this record, and I'll make the end date smaller than start date, and I'll open a developer tool and go to network, and if I click on save and close, then yeah, we can see the error message and no API request has been sent to Dataverse for updating this record. So this validation is happening at client side only. However, in case I make the end date as greater than start date, and if I again open the developer tool now, network, and I'll click on save and close, then we can see we are having this batch request. So in this batch request, this is the URL. This is the URL, API URL for updating the record in Dataverse. So, so this validation, this is always client side. So these are the business rule in this model driven app. Then we will see the business rule in Canvas app. So I have created a Canvas app also for this Dataverse table. This is the Canvas app. And before this, uh, in order for a business rule to be applicable to Canvas app, the scope should always be table. It cannot be at form level. If it's at form level, then it will not be applicable to Canvas app. And the second point which I would like to make is, in this slide, I have listed different business rule, and these three business rules, these are UI level. So these business rules, these are not applicable to Canvas app. These are applicable only to model driven app. So I can show this also. For example, lock unlock. So the business rule for lock unlock was, in case the estimated budget, if this is greater than 100, in case the status is approved, in that case the estimated budget should be locked. However, in this case we can see the status is approved. This is approved. However, this estimated bill budget, this is not locked. If I click on edit, then we can see I will be able to edit this. I can change this and I can save this also. It has got saved. And I'll show some other business rules. For example, show error message. So the condition for show error message was the start date should be smaller than end date, or else it will show an error message. So if I, let's say if I edit this record, I'll make the end date as yesterday's date, and I'll make the start date as today's date. And if I click on this save, then it's showing an error message that cannot save this record. And one more point I'd like to add is, as I mentioned that these lock, unlock, show, hide, recommendation, sorry, not recommendation, these two, let's say if you want to implement this in Canvas app, in that case, we have to write Power FX code. So let's say if we want to log this estimated budget, if the status is approved, in that case, for this component, we have to write a Power FX code where we can set a condition for lock unlock property that if the value is of status is approved or rejected, in that case, make it as locked. Same thing we can do for visibility also. And one more point I like to mention is we saw in our model driven apps that the validation was at client side, but here it is at server side. So if I go to my developer tool, network, and if I click on submit, here we can see that our start date that is greater than end date. So if I click on save, then we can see we are having this batch request. So in this batch request, an API call is made to the Dataverse table to update the record. However, since it is not as per our business rules, so we will get a response that it is a bad request. So yeah, this is all about business rule in Canvas app. Finally, one point I would like to make is in our model driven app, let's say we want to create a business rule which is not provided out of the box. Let's say we want to create a business rule which is not out of these. For example, we want to have a validation that whatever project name which we are updating here, that should be there in our Salesforce application. In that case, we have to write a JavaScript code. If I go to forms, the edit form, here we are having this JavaScript option. So we have to add a library, and this way we can achieve validations like that. Our JavaScript code that will make an API request to the Salesforce application and it will perform the validation. So this way we will have full flexibility for creation of business rules. So yeah, that's all about business rules. Thank you.